All right, we're back. After doing our prep for the wings, we can start doing the laminate. And so if you remember, we did the spray application of the 3M90. As you can see, this wing was black. Now it's pretty white. We got a good amount of spray adhesive on there, and that's how we want it. Before I had done this, I was thinking that I was going to put the motor mount on before I put the laminate on, but I actually changed my mind. I want to do it where I put the motor mount on outside of the laminate. So what I did was I marked the area for the motor mount, and I took welder's glue and I just put a nice layer of welder's glue on here and let it dry. So that way, once I put the laminate on, we'll heat this all on. This area right here is going to stick better than any place else. It's going to stick great to these parts, but it's going to really make a nice solid layer of laminate and foam and adhesive. And then I'll take the Dremel and I will sand this afterwards, and then we'll glue the motor mount to that, and it's going to be really, really sound. So I'm going to do that just because I want to have a nice easy lam on here instead of having to do any cutouts or anything. Not to mention, I can actually put it flat on this table. As you can see, when you do your lam, you want to have this flat. I'd really like to have a wing bed that I could sit this in. However, this wing does not come with one. So in an effort to try to keep this wing as flat as possible during the process, I want to have a nice flat table to put it on, to use it on. This is granite countertop, so this is going to be fantastic. And I will also use weights just to hold it in place while I do lam on an area that I'm not working on. Just keeps the wing in its spot without sliding around the table and all of that kind of thing. So I'm using a standard 5mm laminate. This should work out really good. I've set my iron to a temperature of roughly 325 degrees. If I'm using thinner lam like a 3mm, I'll go a little cooler. If I'm using thicker stuff like a 10mm, I'll go a little bit warmer, but this should work fine. So let's get started, and I'm going to add a weight here just to hold this in place. I've already trimmed and given a rough cut on the laminate as it is, so I have some overlap that goes over the edge. It's not trimmed perfect. We'll go back and do a final trim and a fold over in a minute, but I'm going to put a weight on it, and we're always going to start from the center and work our way outward. So I'm going to go here and give it a nice little rub, give it a little pull, and it's nice to have the weights on here because I can actually pull it without it moving anywhere. Now, I learned this technique somewhere in someone else's video, but I will pass that along too. Some people will go and put a straight streak with the iron down and then just rub around. I don't do that. What I found works, because what happens is after the laminate's on here, you'll see these pulls to it from where you did the first streak, and then it'll start to pull away. So what I like to do is, taking it from the center and working out, just lay the laminate flat and run these strips like this. And I'll do strips just like that. Holds it in place nicely, and then I can just go and fill in all the areas that in between the stripes. And the laminate comes out looking really uniform, really nice. So again, I want to put some weight on there. I want to hold it, I want to pull out just a little and just run a strip, just like that. Couple strips. Now we're going to go back and we're going to fill from the center out. And I like to do this little circular motion. It really doesn't mean anything. It's not a benefit or a plus or a minus rather. It's just what I like to do. And by doing this, you don't have to sit there and tug on the laminate. You can kind of just let it sit in its spot because you've already tacked it in place. And it actually starts to work pretty quick. Now I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see this, but the 3M90 underneath is actually starting to melt a little. You can actually see it melting a little. So once it starts to harden up after the heat is gone, it makes a really, really strong bond. That's what we're looking for. So we'll just follow that around. All right, so now that I'm at this point, I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to do a nice trim so I can fold over. I'm going to fold over in all these areas. So a nice sharp pair of scissors. I give about an inch or so overlap off the edge of the wing, and I just follow the edge of the wing all the way down. Actually, let's cut that from this side. All right, and we'll take some off of the tips here as well. I will not fold over the tips. This needs to remain raw foam on the tips. I will trim that so it's flush with the edge later on, but you don't want to fold it over because you want your winglet to stick directly to the foam. One of the things I see a lot is guys will put winglets on and next thing you know, boom, they take a little hit and they pop off. It's one of the most annoying things there is, especially in the wintertime when it's cold. They'll tend to pop off, but I like to give them a nice roughen up with a Dremel and then glue them on with welders. And I have yet to have one come off even in the coldest months. But it has to be directly to the foam. Okay. I'm going to cut in here. Okay. So, you're actually catching me standing up and doing this. A lot of time I like to do it from the floor. I'll sit on the floor and actually have it in my lap and do all this, but I always put it on the tabletop just to get this initial done so I'm not warping the wing. But from here, what I'll do is I just do light little circles and roll this around. Roll it around the edge. See that? Just roll it around the edge. And that way it kind of pulls it over the top while heating it. And you can see the laminate just starts to roll itself over to the top all on its own. And then once I get to the top, I need to be careful because I don't want to touch the foam and the adhesive on the other side. So I usually won't get it all the way. I'll just run the iron as close to the edge as possible and just kind of tack it in place. The final heating will happen when I do the top side. It'll heat both the top and the bottom, and this will stick really good at that point. So I just want to be careful because I don't want to gum up. I don't want to hit the adhesive and mess up the adhesive, and I don't want to mess up my iron getting goo all over it. So I just lightly go up to the edge. Good. And again, I'll just iron and roll over the edge. Just roll over the edge. Okay, so we're back. And the bottom is complete now. We've got the front edge rolled over. We've got all the back rolled over in all its spots like this. So this should be pretty nice. We're going to grab another piece of laminate and we're going to do the top side. I'm going to use the same technique as I did on the bottom. And we should come out with a nice, pretty quick laminate job on this. I've already trimmed it. I just give it a quick cut just to get the basic outline of it with a little bit of overlap. And again, I want to start from the center and work out. I'm just going to use a weight to hold it in place. So we'll tack it. And I want to pull forward just a little bit here and tack it and tack it. And because this wing is flat, virtually flat on the bottom, this is going to sit nice on the table. It's not going to bend or flex much, so it should be much easier than doing the bottom side. All right, so again, I'm going to just pull out lightly and run my iron. Just do a couple of strips here just to tack it in place. And then do the other side. Okay, good. So now we'll just go back and we'll just fill in all the spots. A little bit of pressure, a little bit of heat. Okay, so we got the basic top all on there. So now it's pretty much ready to just do the trim on the edges. And with this, I do it a little bit different. I'm actually going to roll it over the edge just a little and then trim. I think it might be easier. Yeah, I'll roll it over the edge and then I'll trim. Let's do a little cuts here. I don't want to do this. Okay, so as I mentioned before, I have the bottom layer rolled over the edge. Just going to roll this side over top of it and hold the iron there just a little while, longer than I normally would, just so I can heat the bottom layer as well as the top layer and seal those all up. And I'm not going to roll all the way around the edge as I did before. I'm just going to roll up to the edge so that I can still have enough laminate that I can trim it nicely. Just trying to get that seal. That looks good. And just enough. Leave it on there just enough that I can get all of this. You can see the other laminate below it actually start to turn clear, and you know that you got both layers. So now we'll flip this over, and again, I'll take like an inch, maybe a little bit less, about a half an inch to an inch of overlap. Can't really have too much because adding a little bit extra, it just folds back more. It doesn't hurt anything. I just like to do about an inch or so. All right, let's trim the back here. I'll go a little closer on the back because I don't need as much overlap. I can get that. Good. All right, so again, I'll just do my little circles and roll this all over the edge. Roll it all the way around. You can still see the adhesive bubbling a little underneath. That's good. It tells me I'm heating it enough. All right, that side's done. When you're doing the trailing edge, try to be careful because this one doesn't have a sharp edge to it. It has a flat edge. If you have a wing that has a sharp edge, you can, if you leave the heat on there and press too hard, you can actually ruin that edge. This is a little more forgiving, but you don't want to press real hard. You want to just kind of get it the heat on there and roll over.
These little points here.
If you press too hard, you can actually put like, you can actually change this from a straight edge to something other than that. It's a little bit of tedious work, but and it really will show up when you go to do the elevons. So just use, comes out really nice. Just be a little delicate when you do this part, and it really makes the wing durable. All the lamb is done now, top and bottom. Came out nice and clean. The edges are all rolled over real nice. It's all covered. Might think this is done, but it isn't. We're going to go back and do the special technique with the blow dryer. Or you can use a blow dryer. I use a heat gun on a low setting. And it's actually going to help this shrink more and actually become nice and smooth. So I take a nice clean terry cloth or a microfiber cloth, and I set my heat gun to a low setting, and what I do is I just heat along here, and what you'll see, I'm not sure if you can see this very well, but what you'll see is the laminate will start to shrink. It'll start to shrink and pull and become nice and smooth. And I try not, this more than anything, try not to leave the heat in one spot for too long. And even heat a nice good area here. Go back and forth. And if you get some light that's shining on it just at the right angle, you can see the sheen, the reflection off of the foam and the laminate, and that way you can see that it's actually shrinking. And once it starts to get a little bit of shrink to it, take your cloth and rub it. Just rub on it. And you'll actually see the laminate become really shiny. That's when you know that you've gotten it pretty good. I'm actually going to set a weight on here and hold this in place. But this is a technique I learned from another builder that it's fantastic. It's a great way to finish the wing and make it look really, really good. And even if you take a crash, you get in a crash, take a hit, or you're out on some moist day where it's we're really kind of damp out, when you get home and your laminate starts to pull away a little, look a little wrinkled, take the heat gun to it. It'll make it look like new again. If you look here closely, you can see kind of lines that are pulling out this way. If you look back this way, you can see that it's nice and shiny. It's like shiny, really shiny, and the laminate looks like it's pulled nice and tight. That's what we're shooting for. So I'll go over the whole wing and do this process, and it actually tightens up all the little wrinkles, all the little pockets, especially in areas like this area where I had the cutout. I'm actually going to do that area so it pulls all this around it nice and tight. And this gives you an idea of how much the laminate will shrink. Just by doing this, you'll see. The laminate will shrink up, and I want to rub it. And that way it sets the adhesive. And typically I want to, you might ask, well, how long do you sit here and like rub this in? You want to rub it till it kind of cools off some. If it's still warm, it can start to, pull in a direction you might not want it. But I like to sit here and just give it a little until it starts to cool down, and you can feel it'll start to cool down, and that way you know that it's sticking really good and the adhesive's not gonna lift up.